History Secrets.
One of the most provocative claims in the history of religions is the following: Jesus may not have founded Christianity. According to this interpretation, the true founder of institutional Christianity would have been Paul of Tarsus. This idea arises in academic and historical debates about how religions transform over time, and it raises a fundamental question. What was the original message of Jesus, really? Some scholars suggest that the teachings of Jesus had characteristics close to ancient mystical traditions, especially currents that we now call Gnostic. Gnosticism was not a single organized religion. It was a set of spiritual movements that emphasized inner knowledge. The word gnosis means exactly that: deep or spiritual knowledge. According to this view, many religious traditions operated on different levels of teaching: a public layer, an inner layer, and a secret layer. The public layer contained moral teachings accessible to everyone, messages about compassion, forgiveness, and justice. In the canonical Gospels, we find many of these messages. For example, the Sermon on the Mount: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." These words present a radical ethic. They value humility, generosity, and care for the marginalized. But some ancient texts suggest that there were also deeper teachings intended for close disciples. Among these texts is the so-called Gospel of Thomas, a manuscript discovered in 1945 in the region of Nag Hammadi in Egypt. This document is part of a collection of Gnostic writings that offer different interpretations of the teachings of Jesus. One of the most well-known sayings from this gospel states, "There is a light within the human being, and if this light shines, it will illuminate the world." This language suggests a spiritual vision based on inner transformation, the idea that each person carries a divine spark. According to Gnostic traditions, knowledge of this spark would allow the individual to transcend material reality. Many of these ideas have parallels with ancient philosophies, such as Platonism, and also with Eastern spiritual traditions. In some versions of Gnostic thought, the material universe is seen as imperfect, or even as the result of a cosmic error. In these narratives, there is a supreme divine principle, called by some texts the monad or the one. From this principle emerge different levels of spiritual reality. According to certain Gnostic interpretations, the material world would have been created by an imperfect entity, sometimes called the demiurge. This entity would not fully understand the higher divine reality, and therefore would create a world marked by suffering and imperfection. Within this world, however, human beings would carry fragments of the original divine light. The spiritual mission would be to recognize this inner light, and to seek knowledge that allows a return to divine reality. In this context, Jesus could be interpreted as a spiritual teacher who came to reveal this knowledge. His parables and teachings could then be seen as symbolic clues for this inner awakening. But this interpretation represents only one of many ways to understand the history of early Christianity. Over the first centuries, different Christian communities developed distinct interpretations of the message of Jesus. Some emphasized inner spiritual knowledge. Others emphasized faith, redemption, and salvation. Gradually, One of these interpretations became dominant, the one associated with the writings of Paul and the theology developed by the early Christian churches. This tradition emphasized that Jesus died to redeem the sins of humanity, and that his resurrection offered salvation to all who believed. Over the centuries, this view became the core of institutional Christianity. Meanwhile, many Gnostic movements were considered heretical, and their texts disappeared or were preserved only in small circles. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts in the 20th century rekindled academic interest in these forgotten traditions. Today, scholars continue to debate how these different movements contributed to the formation of Christianity. This debate reveals something important about the history of religions. They rarely emerge fully formed and defined. They evolve, they transform, and they reflect theological, cultural, and political debates of each era. For this reason, understanding the origins of Christianity involves analyzing multiple traditions, multiple texts, and multiple interpretations. And perhaps this diversity reveals something essential about the human spiritual quest itself, a continuous search for meaning, for truth, and for a deeper understanding of reality. Regardless of specific interpretations, the teachings attributed to Jesus continue to inspire millions of people around the world. Whether through compassion, forgiveness, or the search for inner transformation, these values remain central in many spiritual traditions to this day. To understand how these ideas evolved, it is necessary to observe the historical context in which Jesus lived. The region of Judea, in the 1st century, was under the control of the Roman Empire. This was a period of intense political and religious tension. Various Jewish groups competed for spiritual authority. Among them were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. Each group had different interpretations of religious law and the future of the Jewish people. At the same time, many Jews believed that the world was approaching a profound transformation. They expected the arrival of a Messiah, a figure who would restore justice and liberate the people. In this environment of apocalyptic expectation, preachers and prophets frequently appeared. Some announced religious reforms. Others preached political change. Jesus appears in this context as an itinerant teacher, someone who taught through parables, simple stories with deep meanings. His teachings attracted followers, but also aroused suspicion among religious authorities. In addition, any popular movement could be seen by the Romans as a potential political threat. For this reason, religious leaders and Roman authorities often reacted quickly to figures considered agitators. According to traditional accounts, Jesus was arrested in Jerusalem, tried, and sentenced to crucifixion. Crucifixion was a punishment reserved by the Roman Empire for serious crimes, especially rebellion or threat to public order. But something unexpected happened after his death. Instead of disappearing, the memory of Jesus began to expand. His followers began to spread his teachings, and to interpret his death as an event of deep spiritual meaning. In many cases, the execution of a religious leader can strengthen the impact of his message. Martyrdom transforms the executed figure into a symbol of injustice, of courage, or of spiritual revelation. This phenomenon has occurred many times throughout history. When an authority attempts to silence a dissident voice, it may end up amplifying its influence. After the death of Jesus, different communities began to interpret his life and teachings in various ways. Some emphasized his role as a spiritual teacher. Others emphasized his role as a redemptive Messiah. Among the most important figures in this process was Paul of Tarsus, a missionary who traveled extensively throughout the Roman world. Paul reinterpreted the message of Jesus for a broader audience, including people who did not belong to the Jewish tradition. His writings emphasized the idea of universal salvation, the belief that the death and resurrection of Jesus offered redemption to all humanity. These ideas became central to the Christian theology that would develop in the following centuries. Gradually, Christian communities organized texts considered authoritative. These texts would form what we now know as the New Testament. Other writings, such as many Gnostic texts, ended up outside the official canon. Even so, these texts preserve alternative perspectives on the early centuries of Christianity and help historians understand the diversity of ideas present in that period. The process of forming an institutional religion involves choices, theological debates, and disputes of interpretation. Over time, some interpretations become predominanter, while others remain as parallel traditions. In the case of Christianity, the interpretation that emphasizes redemption through faith became dominant too. This view shaped churches, doctrines, and institutions over 2,000 years. But contemporary interest in Gnostic texts shows that many questions remain open. Questions about the original meaning of Jesus' teachings, about how different communities understood his message, and about how religious ideas evolve over time. These discussions do not diminish the historical or spiritual importance of Christianity. On the contrary, they reveal the richness and complexity of its origins. Because every religious tradition is also a human story, a story of search, of interpretation, and of transformation over the centuries. Perhaps it is precisely this capacity for adaptation that allows religions to continue influencing societies for so many centuries. And perhaps that is why the figure of Jesus continues to be an object of study, reflection, and inspiration in different cultures and traditions around the world. This was just one of the many enigmas that have crossed the centuries. Around the world, there are lost cities, indecipherable manuscripts, and historical events that still challenge our understanding. Some of these mysteries have begun to be revealed. Others remain completely unexplained. And in the next documentary, we will explore one of these enigmas that continues to intrigue historians to this day. Because when it comes to the history of humanity, there is always a new secret waiting to be discovered. Because some secrets of history are still waiting to be revealed.